Hello and welcome to The Week with John Simpson, as our World Affairs editor joins us to take a look back at some of the biggest stories that have been making the headlines in the last few days. And John, what a week it's been. Let's go straight in, because earlier this week, Palestine was recognised as a country by the United Kingdom, France and several other nations.
The hope of a two-state solution is fading. But we cannot let that light go out.
This is about the world saying enough is enough. We want peace and security in the Middle East. This is Australia playing a role.
I recognize the legitimacy of so many Palestinian people who want a state, who are a people, they want a nation, they want a state, and we should not push them towards Hamas.
There we are, some of the leaders talking about why they have recognised Palestinian statehood. John, this was a week really when Israel started to look incredibly internationally isolated, didn't it?
It did, and I think that's the most important thing. The question of recognising Palestine doesn't mean to say that Palestine is going to become a state. Well, perhaps it never will. I mean, that's what the current Israeli government would like to ensure, that it never does. So we're not talking about the creation of a nation. What we are talking about is the gradual, actually it's not even that gradual, shift in international opinion away from Israel. Now, okay, a lot of people walked out when Benjamin Netanyahu spoke at the UN today, but, you know, we do have short memories. I mean, they walked out last year, about the same numbers as far as I could tell. I don't think that's got worse. But what has got worse is that the pressure on Israel is definitely growing, and it's growing in the one place that matters to them, which is the United States. For the first time, just a few weeks ago, an opinion poll showed that a majority of Americans, or indicated that a majority of Americans no longer supported or approved of Israel. That will have its effect, perhaps it's already having its effect, on even a man like Trump, who's a rock-solid supporter. And he said yesterday there was no question of Israel being allowed to annex the West Bank. So he's starting to put up barriers there. And, you know, the effect of the way that Netanyahu responded was characteristically, of course, very fierce.
Yeah, and we heard from him today saying, you know, this idea of recognising Palestine as a state, he said it's a reward for Hamas. He said murdering Jews pays off, talking about October the 7th, of course.
Yeah. And that's been the big argument, which has had some effect, I think, in both Britain and France. And I'm not quite so sure about Canada, because the feeling in Canada is much more strong. But there is that sense in which people are moving, people that have been close to Israel traditionally are starting to move away. And that must be, or it should be, quite worrying for Israel. All
right, John, thank you for that. Let's move on to another of the week's big stories now. And former French President Nicolas Sarkozy being sentenced to 5 years in jail after he was found guilty of criminal conspiracy. That's in a case related to millions of illicit funds from the late Libyan leader and dictator Colonel Gaddafi.
Ask the French people whether they voted for me or not, whether they supported me or not, to appreciate what has just happened. Hatred truly knows no bounds. I will take my responsibilities, I will comply with the summonses of justice, and if they absolutely want me to sleep in prison, I will sleep in prison, with my head held high. I am innocent.
Well, John, this is an extraordinary story. I think I'm right in saying he would be the first post-war French leader to serve jail time. What do you make of it?
Well, he's actually, I think, I've been looking it up. There was a guy called Joseph Caillot, who was a Prime Minister before the First World War.
Right.
He started advocating peace with Germany during the Second World War, during the First World War, and got jailed for it. That is
Slightly different crime, yes.
Slightly different crime. Rather more similar crime, though. In 2011, Jacques Chirac, the former president of France, was accused of taking bribes and corruption of different kinds, but while he was mayor of Paris. And that was a suspended sentence. He never actually spent a night in jail, although a lot of his political enemies thought he ought to. But what's happening with Sarkozy is that tonight he's then there in jail, and he'll be there for, well, however long. I know in 5 years it's a sentence.
France always seems to have a sort of love-hate relationship with its presidents, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the love so much.
Well, they love them at the beginning, maybe.
Yes. I mean, Sarkozy, I've met him, I've interviewed him. He was a slightly absurd figure. And if he hadn't been married to Carla Bruni, that marvellous singer, I think he would have looked really quite an absurd figure. But he had this very dodgy relationship with Colonel Gaddafi. Not a man that you should, really.
Somebody also that you interviewed, I think I'm right.
Well, various times, yes.
Yeah.
Over the years, yes. Completely barking mad, of course, but not only barking mad, but also horribly corrupt. And Sarkozy made a terrible mistake by getting close to him and allowing himself to be drawn into that, and that's why he's spending time in jail tonight. The extraordinary thing is, Ben, if you remember back in 2011, the Arab Spring, Gaddafi was murdered pretty horribly. Yep. He was escaping from the capital out to his base at Sirte, and nobody knew where he was going, and particularly the NATO forces, which were trying to hunt him down, didn't know. Sarkozy had his mobile phone number, got in touch with the French military, and a NATO plane hit the convoy, and he was murdered by the people on the ground. So Sarkozy is suffering now for all sorts of things, but partly because he was the one that led to Gaddafi's death.
That's fascinating. John, thank you for that. Well, let's talk about the United States now, because President Donald Trump has changed quite dramatically his stance on Ukraine. He suggested that it, in fact, could win back all of its territory.
3.5 years of fighting and killing everybody, of killing 7,000 people a week for nothing, So it's a very sad situation, but most of you have seen the recent statement I put out a little while ago, and I'm glad you got it, but I feel that way. I really do feel that way. Let them get their land back.
Yep.
Donald Trump there. John, it's very hard to keep up with Donald Trump's changes on foreign policy, isn't it? I mean, it's not that long ago that we had that incredible scene in the Oval Office when he was berating Volodymyr Zelensky, telling him, you're gambling with World War III, you don't hold the cards, etc., etc. Then talking about a land swap with Russia, now saying, actually, Ukraine could win back all its territory.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know what the Ukrainians think about this. They don't think that Donald Trump has somehow come over to their side and that he's encouraging them to win back all their territory, and perhaps more, he was saying. They interpret it privately as meaning he's just sick of the whole thing. He doesn't think Putin is going to play ball. He doesn't want to have a major falling out with Putin by siding wholeheartedly with Ukraine. And he's just saying, look, do what you want. And it was quite noticeable. He didn't say, we, the United States, will support you in your continuing war. He said, Europe will support you. That's, I think, what this means. That he's just saying, look, I've had it. I've done my best, tried to win the Nobel Prize for bringing peace to Ukraine. I've failed. just tell me when it's over.
Of course, he said he could solve it in a day on the campaign trail, didn't he? But I mean, it seemed at one stage like maybe even now, he had a soft spot for Vladimir Putin. He rolled out the red carpet for him with that summit in Alaska. Do you think he's sort of somehow fallen out now with Vladimir Putin, or just given up on him, or lost patience with him?
I think the middle one. I think he's given up on him. I think he realises that, that Putin isn't that kind of deal maker that Trump loves to see himself as, and likes in other people, and has found, for instance, with Keir Starmer, that they're not pushing for a hard deal. They do soft deals, and that's true of all the Europeans. Could even be eventually true of the Canadians, even, but. It isn't true with Putin.
He doesn't really want to do a deal at all.
He doesn't want to do it, doesn't feel he needs to do one at the moment. And if the economy in Russia turns really bad, then he may well feel he's got to do a deal. But for the moment, he feels he's pushing ahead and doesn't need to do one.
We're going to stay in the United States because a sniper opened fire at an ICE, that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement Center in Texas, apparently targeting immigration agents, but in fact killing one of the detainees there.
This is the third shooting in Texas directed at ICE or CBP. This must stop. To every politician who is using rhetoric demonizing ICE and demonizing CBP, stop.
Well, John, this is another example of political violence in the United States. Trump said it was the radical left inciting violence. Very quickly after the Charlie Kirk shooting. What do you make of it? I mean, it's scary, isn't it?
It is, but I think it's scary for a slightly different reason. It's scary because of the copycat nature of it. This is like school shootings. Somebody has a row with his headmaster or with the other kids at the school, goes in with a gun, blows people away. Somebody else has the same idea, does the same thing. I think what we're seeing here is a copycat approach. And there are certain aspects of it which are immediately copied. I don't know if you remember, was it just over a year ago, I think, that a guy called Brian Thompson, who was the CEO of a big healthcare outfit, was murdered in the street by somebody called Luigi Mangiani. And Mangiani had inscribed the cartridge cases with all sorts of things. I think I noted it down. He wrote deny, defend, depose. Now we're starting to see that being copied. I mean, the man that killed Charlie Kirk, he's accused of killing Charlie Kirk, inscribed on the cartridge cases, "Hey, fascist, catch." And now this new shooting, the cartridge cases say anti-ISIS. There's such a strong copycat element in this that it is very worrying. But eventually, I mean, like we haven't had a school shooting for some time now. It does sort of fade.
Yeah, and I mean, what's the bigger picture here? Because we see in America the language of political debate increasingly, just the words that are used, increasingly sort of violent and vitriolic, really. Is this spilling over into political violence, do you think?
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, there's no question about that people are seeking a way of expressing that hatred, and it's easy in a country where there are more guns than people to express it by shooting. But I just think that we often are inclined, and Americans themselves are often inclined to talk about, a new civil war and the dangers. Well, of course, they are saying that, aren't they, about Britain? And yet, you go down the street and you see there's no sign of any possibility of a civil war.
But have you seen America in recent memory as divided, dangerously divided as it is now?
Never. And I mean, my memory of reporting in America goes back, I'm afraid, to John F. Kennedy's murder. That was a sign of great tension and hatred. But the country came together. I mean, one of the things that we've noticed about the Charlie Kirk killing was that, far from trying to bring the country together, Donald Trump used it to attack his enemies and critics on the left.
Right, we're going to end with Gaza, because the BBC, together with 3 news agencies, this week launched a short film calling on Israel to allow international journalists access into Gaza.
The Israeli government will not allow international reporters into Gaza to do their work and to document freely what they see. International journalists must now be allowed into Gaza.
But of course, international journalists are not allowed into Gaza, although they have been, on very rare occasions, under strict conditions and under strict control. I mean, I often interview Israeli government and military spokesmen, and they criticise our coverage of Gaza, and then I say, well, why don't you let us in to go and see for ourselves?
Well, I've not been there. I have been there in previous Israeli attacks on Gaza, I think 3 of them, and I've been to Israeli major attacks in Lebanon in 1982, 2006. There, in particular, on those 2, the incursions into Lebanon, the damage, the destruction, the killing of civilians was such that a great deal of people across the world expressed their anger at what was happening, and indeed in Israel itself. And there were strong hostile movements in Israel. This time, of course, we don't see the pictures, not to the same extent. There are some amazingly brave Palestinian journalists, but Israel's often able to say, well, you know, they're Hamas, or they're pro-Hamas, or they're working under Hamas's controls. And that cuts away at the forcefulness of it, and we just are not able to see the day-by-day destruction of life and property that's been there. And I think, you know, I mean, the BBC's line and Reuters, AP, AFP, the other news agencies, and most journalists from other newspapers would agree, you know, it has to be reported. But of course, that would have a major effect on the ability that Israel has to continue absolutely wiping Hamas out. At least that's its intention.
I mean, it would be a very dangerous place, obviously, for any journalist to go into. I mean, what do you think? What are Israel's motives for not letting international journalists have any independent access to Gaza?
I just don't think they want people around the world to see the absolute hour-by-hour daily horror of what's happened in Gaza. And I think they much prefer to keep it in the way that it has been, with, yes, you know, regular photographs coming up. That it doesn't have the same effect. Bits of video, but you can always say, you know, it was done by Hamas or Hamas sympathizers. It doesn't have the effect of somebody like you, Ben.
Or you, John.
Well, you know, I'm getting it on a bit for that, but, you know, marching in and showing people, being the eyes and ears of the outside world.